We will be discussing when it is appropriate to start thinking about payroll, how business formation factors into payroll, and some consequences for not establishing proper payroll.
Educate your money now.
Hello, and welcome to Educating Your Money podcast. I'm your host, Kristin Kirui-Case, owner of MattNik Bookkeeping Services. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Today's episode is called What to Do When My Business Needs Payroll. We will be discussing when it is appropriate to start thinking about payroll, how business formation factors into payroll, and some consequences for not establishing proper payroll. We would like to thank Out and About Business Solutions for sponsoring our podcast. Today's guest is Shannon Theis, owner of Payroll Solutions Plus. Shannon has been in the payroll and accounting industry since 2003, and then in 2010, she started her own company and recently rebranded a segment of her business into payroll restoration. She has also created a Facebook mentoring group for bookkeepers and payroll providers where she provides support and weekly Q&A calls to answer specific questions and discuss hot topics. Hi, Shannon, and thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, wow, that was a big introduction. Hopefully I can live up to the hype.
Right, yeah, well, when a business is at a point of establishing payroll, they usually are lost as to where to start, right? I'm sure you come into that all the time. And
yeah, I do.
Yeah, and many don't realize that they should actually start long before, it is time for them to even establish payroll because there's so many things to consider. So Shannon, when is it an appropriate time for a small business owner to start thinking about their payroll needs?
Before they hire their first employee is a good time to think about payroll. Another time that a business owner needs to think about payroll is if they're a corporation or electing S-Corp status, because the business owner then is required to be on payroll and receive reasonable compensation. There's a few exceptions to that, but we're not going to go into that. But a lot of times I'll find a business owner who is an LLC, they haven't elected S-Corp status, and they put themselves on payroll. And that is not correct. Some tax preparers will just leave it because they're just prepaying their taxes, but the right way to actually fix it is to what I call unwind their payroll, where we take all of the business owner's payroll out of the books, and we refile their payroll tax returns. And if it's gotten to the end of the year, we redo their W-2. And because the correct way to treat employee or the business owner payroll is on the tax return, on the 1040 with the Schedule SE.
As self-employed.
Not through payroll, yes.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question in regards to, I've had questions about formation, like does it matter what formation you're in when you're establishing payroll?
Yeah, for the reasons that I just described. But, on the other side of the spectrum, I'll get referrals from tax preparers where the S-Corp owner either didn't know that they needed to be on payroll, or they knew and just didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have fixed both ends of the spectrum where we have an employer or a business owner that wasn't supposed to be on payroll and they were, or one that was supposed to be on payroll and they weren't. So it can be a little tricky to do it both ways because sometimes there's penalties involved too that we need to work on getting them removed.
Yeah. So what are some things that a business owner should know about when establishing payroll for their company?
Well, I think sometimes people don't realize that they need to set up employer accounts with their state. And every state, they have to have unemployment. And work comp is another one. And work comp varies by state, whether the business owner is required to be on unemployment or not. And in some states, you don't have to have unemployment until you have 5 employees. And work comp varies that same way. So every state has websites that are full of all the resources that you need to know, but some people just don't know either how to get there or that it's there. And a lot of times their advisors, if they're not familiar with payroll, they might not know where they need to go to find the information. And that's what we're trying to help with our different groups and programs and courses, is to help people have those resources.
And what if they have employees in multiple states? What should they be made aware of?
Well, that is really tricky. Some states have reciprocity agreements, and it doesn't necessarily matter where the employee lives if they work at your office location, because there's a lot of border state issues where you have employees in one state, but the headquarters or the office work location is in one state. It doesn't matter where the employee lives, it matters where they work. Mm-hmm. And now with COVID, we have a lot of employers who are letting their employees work from home remotely. So there was talk of having open reciprocity agreements between different states, but that is not what is actually happening. If you say you live in Minnesota and the office location is in Minnesota, but the employee lives in Iowa, and the employee is working remotely from home, the employer now has to set up Iowa Department of Revenue and Iowa unemployment for that employee and start now accruing unemployment and paying and withholding the income tax portion for Iowa and not Minnesota. And that's where I'm thinking a lot of businesses are going to need help getting that fixed, because I just see there's a lot of that happening. I mean, there was a lot of it happening already before, but it's just going to be compounded now with the access of remote work.
And so for those where that situation is the case, so do they switch back then? Like say when that person is no longer, it's post-COVID where everything's fine and we're back to normal. That person now is traveling now back to the headquarters on a daily basis as normal. That employer need to change that back?
Yes, they will. And if they don't, and I would recommend closing the accounts in the states where they've opened them, because otherwise you have to file 0 returns. Yeah. You can't just, create the account and then stop filing the returns. You're going to get notices. So I've seen that happen where all of a sudden they have huge penalties for failure to file when they had no filing requirement, because somebody didn't check the close this account box when they filed their final return.
And so for business owners that have employees out of state working remotely, then they need to be aware that they'll need to open state accounts for those employees in those multiple states.
Yes.
Got it. What are some consequences for a business owner that they can incur if they're not established properly?
Oh, there's a lot of different penalties that they can get hit with. Usually, if they've been paying employees, but they haven't been filing the returns, or they're actually not set up as an employer, we have to go back and say, okay, this is the date that the employees first worked, and if it was last year or last quarter, they'll have late payment and late filing penalties. And right now, the states are being generous with letting you ask for forgiveness and actually getting it. A lot of times, before COVID, they weren't. They'd be like, "Yep, nope, you were supposed to know. Ignorance is no excuse. You have all these penalties. You'll have to pay it. We can set up a payment arrangement if you can't come up with all of it all at once." The IRS has always been a lot more forgiving with getting penalties removed, in my experience, because I have like 98 or 99% success rate with removing penalties from the IRS. And until this year, I only had about a 50-50 shot of getting them removed from a state. So.
Wow. Yeah, so in that particular case, is it in the business owner's best interest to hire a payroll specialist, whether it be a bookkeeper, an accountant, or some payroll software, rather than trying to maintain payrolls by themselves?
If they are starting from a place where where they were doing it incorrectly, their best bet is going to be to hire somebody that specializes in fixing payroll issues. Mm-hmm. And then they can look at the different bookkeeper, accountant, payroll software solutions, but they need to get in compliance first before you can, because if it's not, payroll is one of those things where if it's not set up correctly, it's really unforgiving. You can't just say, like with bookkeeping, you can find a mistake that you made and go back and fix it. And as long as it's in the same tax year, it's not a big deal. But with payroll, there's so many moving pieces. You've got the employee getting paid, you've got the State Department of Revenue, you've got the state unemployment, you've got the IRS. There might be, some places have additional local taxes. So you might have as many as 6 or 7 different taxing authorities involved in your payroll. And if you don't know how to get all of that fixed or set up, you're going to be constantly playing catch up and getting penalties. And because the departments, they talk to each other. Yeah. So if you've got a unemployment account, but you don't have a Department of Revenue account, and you're in a state that has income taxes, they're going to talk to each other. And then all of a sudden, you're going to get demand to file letters and penalties from the State Department of Revenue. So right. It can be daunting, but it's not impossible to navigate yourself. I don't want to, give anybody the impression that payroll isn't something that you can learn how to do, because it is. But you just have to be a good researcher and know how to Google. Yeah. And I sometimes when I say that, people think I'm joking, because everybody's like, well, you just put the Google search term. But it's not that easy. You have to know what search term to put in. You need to know which information is garbage. And usually, for some reason, I don't know why, but in some states, when you try to Google that state's Department of Revenue or unemployment office, you get like 10 different websites before you get actually to the government website. So you just have to know how to sift through all the data and all the information to, one, find the answer to your question, or learn how to ask better questions. Starting September 1st, business owners could choose to allow their employees to defer the employee portion of the Social Security tax, but which sounds good, but you're not the employees are saving 6.2% on every paycheck, but they have to pay it back from January to April because you're not paying it from September 1st to December 31st, but then you're double paying it from January 1st to April 1st or April 30th. But the thing is, if the employee leaves, right now the employer is still on the hook to repay that amount. So it's bad for a couple of different reasons. One, the employee has a little bit of extra money now, but then in January, they're going to have a lot less money because they have to pay it back. And if you're working more hours now and less hours in January or vice versa, you're still the repayment is set to double the amount of Social Security taxes that would have come out of your check in January. So you're not gaining anything at all.
Right.
And right now there's zero chance that tax deferment is going to not have to be repaid. Everything is I know there was some chatter where in some groups where somebody's like, well, it might not have to be repaid, but that's not the case. Right now it is 100% chance that it will have to be repaid unless something changes, but I don't see that happening. And the other reason that it's bad is I don't want to have to pay my employees portion of their Social Security because I'm already paying half of it. Right. So, I don't know that a lot of the employers really understand that they are on the hook for that amount if the employee leaves. What happens if the employee just quits and doesn't come back on December 31st and there's no provision, there's nothing that says I can withhold X amount of dollars from your final paycheck? And usually if somebody's going to quit and not give notice, they don't have very much of a paycheck left anyway.
Does that still apply if, say, the owner has to lay them off? Like, say in December, from September to whatever date that they quit in December, or not quit, laid off in December, and they deferred it, will that be the same thing applies if they're not rehired back until April?
Yeah, the employer has to, 100% of the deferment has to be paid back by April 30th.
Oh, got it, okay.
So the employer has to repay any part that's not repaid by the employee.
Got it. Yeah, well, thank you. Because I was wondering about that.
No, a lot of people are wondering about that. In September, I got asked that question a lot. I know there are people whose clients are allowing their employees to participate in this, but none of my clients have. And I am very, very thankful for that because to try and keep track of it is a headache too.
Right.
Because you can't just say, oh, well, this is how much Social Security we owe. No, you have to break it down by each employee and then not over withhold and not under withhold. It's just, it's just a big PITA. And if you don't have to do it, don't.
I would like to thank Shannon for taking time out of her busy schedule and coming on the show and sharing her expertise. Be sure to post any questions or comments you may have or any topic that you'd like to have discussed on the show. Comment below or email educatingyourmoney@gmail.com. Shannon, if any of our followers have specific questions or wanted to discuss more with you, how can they reach out to you?
They can email me, Shannon at payrollsolutionsplus.net. They can join one of my Facebook groups. The one for payroll is called Payroll Solutions Community for Accounting Professionals. They can visit my Kajabi page, and that is courses.doddconsultingllc.com, because that is the division where I've decided to put all my courses and my trainings in a new company. And I'm sure we'll have links on when this gets posted.
Thanks for watching Educating Your Money podcast, where it's not just about making money, but about educating your money.